Can you fucking hear this?
Can you?
Preston, fuck.
I might leave this in though. Welcome to the Living Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Preston M. Smith. Hey everybody, welcome to the Living Artist Podcast. I'm Preston M. Smith, at PMS Artwork everywhere on internet land and socials. I want to thank you for landing on this podcast. Whether you're a professional artist, just getting started in the art world, a collector of art, or just consider yourself a creative person, this podcast has something for you. I like to think of it as a fun way to rant and talk to other creative people about living the life of an artist, surviving and getting ahead in the art world, and enjoying your life. But most importantly, not waiting until you're dead to make it happen. All right, let's get started.
We're talking art with Preston.
I knew
Here
jingle.
we are talking art.
Jingle
with
by
Preston.
Scott Meskill. Oh, here we go. All right, awesome. We're here. Well, thanks for making the drive up, man.
No problem.
In the
man.
heat.
Excited.
Braving the fire, braving the heat.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on out there.
It's crazy, man. I wanted to ask you about that real quick because as much as I don't like to talk about like politics and what's going on in the world, it's so ever present right now and ubiquitous that like for me, yesterday I almost had a little breakdown. I was like, am I posting enough about it? Should I be talking about it?
Right. Especially with the protests and stuff. It's like, and we're all on edge as to where we stand and proving where we stand. And are we being watched? And now we know that silence is bad, you know, like you're like, oh, okay, so I can't be silent.
Right.
I can't say the wrong thing. I need to say the right thing. And it's just confusing as hell, but still as humans, you know, we got to be good people and hope that the people around us feel that energy. I think there's so much related to just your presence and how you handle yourself publicly and just goddamn do your best, you know?
That's true. I always find that people respond more by you leading by example than by like cramming it down their throat. Yeah. By the way, if anybody's listening to this in the future, we're talking about George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd and the aftermath of all that. It's just been going on for weeks now. And it's, I'm really happy it's happening. The protesting that is. At the same time, I kind of feel like, fuck, do we still live in an era where this is happening? Yeah. Like I was a basketball player. I grew up on like Black culture and athletes and hip hop and like Black movies. And I was like, and just to see this level of racism still in the world is fucking crazy, man.
Yeah. So I was born in Detroit and then grew up in Florida. So some serious racism across the board. And then when I had a choice, I moved to LA and easily saw the difference immediately. Just in the way people treat each other. Right. And so growing up in Florida, you know, there wasn't a large Black community.
Wait, so you were Florida and then Detroit?
No, born in Detroit.
And then
so I was like 10 and then moved to Florida and stayed there till I was like 28, I think.
Okay.
29 when I came to LA. But the difference between how I grew up in my school and it's like there would be a lot of people that would say, oh, we didn't have a racism problem, but we also didn't have a lot of Black culture there at all.
It's easy to not have a racism problem when you don't have any.
So my son, like he's growing up in a totally different world and where he's actually a minority, you know, in LA. And he doesn't know the difference, dude. I see his friends show up and it's just a complete mixed bag.
Yeah.
And it's interesting seeing their perspective on this current state of stuff too. You know?
I'm sure it's completely different from parts of the country.
Yeah. And maybe that's why we're actually up to a level where we can protest is the younger generation is like, fuck this, man.
Yeah, exactly.
You old people might not say anything about it or say there's not a problem, but there is. And here's why. So I'm in full support of what's going on.
Me too.
I don't know how to support it because also, again, when we're talking about the COVID, you're like, well, that doesn't necessarily go with the plan, but what's more important?
Right, exactly. Well, and also just to kind of further that, it's crazy that we're dealing with COVID and then we're dealing with this.
Yeah.
And you got all these protests in the street. So you got people within inches of each other, rubbing up against each other, talking to each other and touching each other. And I just think it's it's brave to be doing it right now.
Yeah.
It's also a little scary.
Yeah.
We're going to find out. We were talking about this on your way in. We're going to find out if there's some spikes, but I'm just overall, I'm glad it's happening and I support it, man.
Totally needs to happen. And that's all. I don't know what.
That's it. We don't need to talk about you.
But it does. So it leads into our artistic practice, and where does that fall into this whole state of mind?
Yes.
Because I mean, I'm sure you and most everybody I know is suffering from some form of depression, and I didn't experience it like this before. Like I've never experienced chest pains, and it's like, why is my chest hurt?
Right.
And then, so how does your art play into all of that? And should I be doing this? Is this important? And having to have that conversation with yourself on a daily basis, like, oh, this doesn't matter. Just, as you know, sometimes like getting to the really deep, gritty work takes being in a certain state of mind to be able to do it. And when you're just completely distracted by things that are extremely important, it doesn't always feel that way, So it's good to have these conversations with other artists and say, hey, why are you still doing it? Or should we? And have people remind you that art, is the one thing that has truly, hopefully existed, throughout mankind. As long as we've been humans, we've been creating. And there's also in the control for power, people have always tried to destroy art in that control of power. So there's a voice in there that's pretty solid and pretty important.
It's one of those things where it's hard enough to create, like, I think of your stuff as, I respond to your stuff because it reminds me of my old stuff too. There's like an existential angst to your work, which is more relevant than ever now.
I think so. Yeah.
But also, like, you're right. It takes a lot of, I don't know. I don't know why gumption came to mind. I'm gonna go back.
Holy shit!
Yeah, I'm gonna dig that one out. It takes a lot of gumption, kid. No, you
got real chutzpah there.
No, but it takes a lot of digging to kind of pull that work out of you already, and then when you're already feeling this existential dread from what's going on in the world, it's like piling on top of you. But I would argue that makes it even more important to do it. Totally. It's just the part that's getting started that's difficult.
You got to dig through it. And so like interesting on that level, I was watching a documentary on Gauguin, and when he went to Tahiti and the way they frame it up, and it's like, ultimately, like his whole family said, hey, we can't support you on this. That's a bad idea. We're not going. But he had this super strong desire to
I'm Gauguin.
Some type of real, but to see some type of real life and capture it and recreate it in a way that no one else did. And it was so important to him that people are willing to die for that. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I work that hard for my art,
right?
But I respect and appreciate like that there's an importance in doing that,
Yeah.
Digging, the digging. And that's what I tell everybody. Like, we're doing the new critique rounds and stuff too, with those guys. And my comments are, like, if anything, because I'm not going into it like I don't want to be handheld. Like, you tell me what sucks about this or what would make this better. And so I kind of try to treat it the same way. And so I look at some stuff. It's hard to critique abstract work,
It's very hard.
But sometimes you can look at it and say, did you dig? Did you dig? Like, I want to see the blood, sweat, and tears. I want to see your indecisions and your struggle, because I respect the shit out of that when I see it. I'm like, oh, you hated that for a day, and it's like
you can see the working through period.
Yeah,
the process. I love that.
I like that struggle.
But sometimes too, there's like a part where the artists push through to the other side of like simplicity. It's almost like they've done that work. They've done that kind of angsty existential work for many years, and then sometimes it's honing that down to simplicity. Like you see that with Matisse when he's older. You see it with a lot of masters. I'm not saying that for the critique group, we're all still, evolving and learning, but it's interesting to watch that as it kind of gets to the final stages of progression, where it is just simplicity of line and color.
Wouldn't that be beautiful? Yeah. If I could let something go, one of the new things I'm kind of struggling with and enjoying at the same time is just transparency, general transparency. Like, you realize, whether you're doing acrylics or oils, it's like a lot of that transparent value is right in the beginning, right? So, and if you don't nail it, then you just start going over it, which is what I normally do anyway. But there's something that happens like immediately if you're in the right zone, that transparent kind of character figures or color and tone that you can't recreate. And if you try to change it, you lose it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's that transparency is there for a brief moment. And I really like that, but I'm not very patient with my work. So I have a hard time retaining that.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's the struggle in general as you get better and better is learning to turn off the inner critic while you're trusting the flow a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like they're always butting heads. Right. You have that moment where an hour is gone and you did something and you're like, oh my God, I don't remember doing this.
Yeah.
And then you have the moment where the critic comes back in. It's like, oh shit, I don't remember doing this. We got to fix this. We got to fix this,
Yeah.
For me, I always feel like the best stuff I've ever done, when I look back on it, I can't even remember creating it. It's not like, I'm not saying that like it was touched by God or something, but it's just, you're in the zone.
You're so lost in the process. Yeah. The flow state. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, in the same vein of transparency, we're filming this for YouTube a little bit, so I'm going to go turn off the camera. But as I'm doing that, I want you to talk about something. So how has everything right now, how has COVID, you don't have to talk about George Floyd anymore, but how has what's been going on in the world right now affected your art? Okay.
So, I mean, clearly my first reaction was like, wow, my art is actually timely now, where it was like these dark, deep feeling type stuff. And how has it affected? The most it's affected is really affected my insecurity and in what I'm doing and my purpose and the way, like I'm having a harder time reaching those states of mind that is necessary. And plus I would do like 2 days in the studio and then 2 days locked at home. My studio, I'm pretty isolated. So I felt it was okay to be there and take precautions. But then I was leaving family members at home that might be alone and trying to struggle and figure this out. And that was on my mind. So normally, I'm at the studio every single day I can possibly manage. But in this kind of world, I was like, let me just check on the people at home and make sure they're okay, and they know I'm here and I'm going through the same things. I'm not just disappearing. In the beginning, I really questioned myself. I could just disappear and go to the studio and just get lost like nothing's changed. And I felt that wasn't very genuine either, or respectful to the process and the time. So it's definitely changed some stuff. I'm starting to get back into my routine a little bit, but still weary because of the just complete confusion. Every day there's a new level of confusion as to what am I supposed to be doing?
Right. And does what I'm doing matter? Like in the face of this, I mean, on a global scale, all this stuff, like does my little shit that I'm creating in my little corner of the city matter? I would argue more, but it's hard to see that.
It's hard to see it. But so surrounding myself with like-minded people and people that have been in the art world longer than me, and really just reaching out for their advice, and they've weathered through stuff, the depression. The first thing I did when this whole thing started was I read that 7th Street Women book.
God, I still got to read that, man.
It's like 700 pages. I'm not a reader.
All the best art books are.
Anybody who tells you I'm almost, I'm a terrible reader. Like I just fall asleep right away. And that one pulled me in and,
Nice.
And I was like, let me make it a goal to finish this book. And I had all the time. So I think that's a really good foundation to see what they went through, the levels of poverty and the levels of dedication to that, no matter what was happening in their life, and
also being women.
Well, I mean, this revolved around that whole world, but yes, obviously women, in that it's definitely a better perspective. We've heard the perspective of men from that generation,
sure.
and it was really good to see their struggles.
Because it has Krasner, right? Krasner's in it.
They were all badass.
Oh my God. Yeah. And of course they were overshadowed by the men some of them were.
They were.
Krasner basically took a back seat. Like one of my favorite 800-page books is the Jackson Pollock book I got up there.
Yeah.
And de Kooning from the same era. I love that era as being an artist, but I'm excited to read it from a female's perspective.
It's really good, dude. It's really good. And the times, and one of the things I pulled out of this, and me and my friend were talking about this the other day, back in those days, like after the war, they had a government program that employed artists basically, and that's how they all survived.
That's how they flourished.
Yeah, but they contributed to society within that process. They weren't just. It's like give them a job, and it's like wow.
Well, they were being valued. They were showing value for being an artist,
rather than this current administration defunding arts programs. It's like, all right, let's put some money in and see what happens and watch it flourish.
When you can argue that was the era that kind of put the United States or American, at least abstract art movement on the map. It was because of all those guys were, and women, all those people were working and employed by the government. And how about having that validation from an outside source, such as like the government? We always struggle to get validation from our parents, from our peers, from ourselves.
Yeah.
The government, forget about it. So having an era where the government was fostering that is amazing.
You got to imagine some good art would come from that, you know?
And it did.
The thing is, it's a different world, and there's so many artists, right? And there's so many good artists these days. Like we were talking about it because I hang out with some of the guys that are kind of old school Venice artists back in the day when the Ferris Gallery and different shit was like happening, and these guys knew each other. Like there was 100 artists, they all knew each other. You know. Now there's 1 million artists in LA easily, if not 5 million. It seems like half the population of LA is an artist, and some extremely talented. So so it makes all of it a little more challenging.
It does, and we're also separated in our different groups, like our different areas of the city. There's like Silver Lake, and then there's downtown, and then there's La Cienega, it also, you throw into that mix like Instagram and all the artists around the world. I get bothered because some of the artists that I see online nowadays, I'm like, because I've heard of this happening and I've seen it happening. Some of them are not artists. There are a few people that are just like posing as artists. They're putting other work on there, like I'm an artist, or let's say you've got an artist who've created 2 pieces and they're competing with you now, and they can actually compete with you. It's good, and it's also bad at the same time. I like it because it gives us like a new audience that we didn't have before. Like we don't have to have the gallery system 100% to make a living anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And the gallery system's failing a lot of people. Even the people I know that are getting some bigger and better shows, when I hear, well, what'd the gallery do for you? And I'm like, God damn, they didn't do shit. They expected you to bring the crowd and you to do the promotion, and
it's the same as like books nowadays. Like if you're trying to publish now, they won't even look at you. I tried to publish a couple books in the past, and it was like, show us you have an audience first. Show us how many sales you made on your own, and then we'll look at you.
Isn't that convenient? Isn't that convenient?
Yeah, exactly.
Show me that you make a lot of money already, and then I will make money from you.
What we want, kid, is we want you to do the legwork.
Yeah.
We'll sit back and reap all the benefits.
No, screw that. And then again, that's why I admire what you're doing, and I watch what you're doing, and it's working for you. It seems like
it's working. I hope it keeps working. I guess the main thing is just to continue adapting, because it's going to change.
Yeah.
And I used to think like there was one way to do it, and luckily, I think I just got so sick of it. I was beating my head up against the wall for so many years that I just was like, okay, I'm going to take this into my own hands. I still do the gallery system. Yeah. Shout out to Mike Collins. He's not definitely one of those gallery owners that we're talking about.
Oh no. Yeah.
But for the most part, I think you're right. I think there's a system in place that's like artists stay out. Yeah. Like you have to fight to get through the door. And now it's like the door's blown wide open online.
Yeah.
If you can get into some of these marketplaces, or you have a good website and you're creating quality work, you can get your work out there. And you have been selling on Artsy.
Yeah.
Which is fucking awesome, man.
And so I love that platform kind of is working. I'm still like, it's usually all my smaller pieces, but just to get that kind of response was really good, because I played on Saatchi for years, and I'm revamping my Saatchi just for the spread. Like I know you have the spread, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't put all your fish in one basket, and it's about eyeballs. But when Mike started that Artsy thing, I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And I think I got first sale out of all of us, and I was like, that I'm putting everything, and
then you got more.
And it's a great way. Also, you got to catalog your stuff.
Yes,
because even if you want to apply to a show or anything, you got to know measurement, size. What did I paint it on? What's the title of it? What's the price of it? And when it's all on one platform, you can go reference that platform because you put all the information in there.
Exactly.
And it lives there. And I'm like, that's a great database. And so trying to get that process and that habit down, I really looked at you and what you were doing. I'm like, how can I do that with what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And good or bad. A lot of my stuff is sculptural and a lot of it is big, and a lot of like shipping is going to be a horrendous nightmare.
Yeah.
And I sold a sculpture on Saatchi that was probably 4 feet tall, steel, and
nice.
I had to build a crate.
How much did it weigh?
It didn't weigh that much. It was only like a 40-pound thing. It was hollow tubing, but
that's still a lot.
It was a lot, but
for art.
It was great in the fact that they sent a truck. Saatchi gives you a shipping label. The truck comes and picks it up and handles all of that.
Yeah,
which was cool. But you still have to build a crate, which I do anyways. But I have other stuff. Like I'm currently on a commission sculpture that is it's probably 300 pounds right now.
Is this the cat?
The cat, the big cat is.
I was going to ask you about that later. Is it how
really
close
heavy.
to being done?
In my mind, like I started this project. So this project came around after my solo at Chalkbox. I had a family member, and she's just
for people listening went very well. You sold. You had some good.
I did. I moved a lot of product like that.
Critical acclaim.
That really kicked off. Like it really felt like, okay, I just started the engine, and I can do this.
Yeah.
And so this commission is kind of a result of a family member reaching out and say, hey, I've been following your work and I love it. I want you to do something.
Yeah.
And that started like last May, I think. The conversation started, and then I did a bunch of maquettes and sketches and kind of thoughts. We went through this process before we decided on the big cat. And then the big cat, I started welding it in, I think November, December, and I'm still working on it. But the thing is with welding, like, it takes a lot out of you, like
sure.
The fumes, the grinding, it's hard on your muscles. And so you can't do 8 hours a day.
And you're
welding.
probably not just focusing on that piece.
No, I have a million other things.
Exactly,
that's the problem.
Exactly.
A lot of it for me is like this exploration. Like, can I do that? How? And then once I figure out I can do it, I'm like, I can do it. No, you got to finish it, dude. And so I'm stoked. I have a great client that's just like, just take your time. Let's nail it and let's work together. And I'm like,
that's the dream.
It is the dream because
it's a lot of work.
I'm hoping it leads to some other stuff too. And,
sure.
And the pieces turn out really good. So for me, I've still got a ways to go. Like if you're working in clay, you build up the form and then you start sculpting. So yes. I feel like I've just built up the form and I've got to do a little bit of grinding, a little bit of tweaking here and there. You just start to notice things that aren't necessarily right. They don't need to be perfect. This isn't going to be a completely realistic, lion or a mountain lion, but I've got some work to do. I've got a few more months still on this.
But I've seen it evolving, and it looks awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, it's gonna be great when it's done. Like
totally.
I already like it. It's gonna be great. Also, it seems like it's a pretty high ticket item, right? I mean,
it is. It probably should be higher ticket than I priced it out, but
sure.
But all of
that's like every piece, in my opinion.
Well, so much of that is like I went through a period of like I'm going to get into public sculpture, outdoor public artwork because every city needs it. There's money for it, and yada yada yada. But when you go to apply for those things, the first thing I want to know is what have you done in the past? You're like, well, I haven't done anything. I think I can. I know, I can. But so you have to be able to pitch things. So for me, this process is also, look, I can do this, and then knowing, like when it comes to welding, this is a steel structure. So it's like, how do you estimate costs of materials, welding gas, welding wire, acetylene, all the different gases involved and how fast am I going to run through that stuff? And if you haven't done that size, you don't know. So there was no way to adequately price out this piece. It's definitely my biggest piece and largest commission to date. But I could have tripled it if I wanted to like really profit. And did I know it was going to take me a year? No.
Yeah.
But those are great. It's a brilliant learning thing. I'm just happy someone has the confidence to throw down some money on anything that I want to do.
Well, it's great too because it sets the stage for you to be able to do more work like that of that value and scale.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's a learning process, right?
Totally.
But also the one last thing I would add to that was I feel like so many times as artists, we're just looking for a sale and you put a lot of work into it. I don't know how many times I've gotten a big sale and then I've done the work of like packaging it, getting it ready to hang, really getting out there. And I'm like, dude, I gave this fucking thing away. You know what I mean?
Well,
there's always an element of that.
People can't, you can't put a price tag on the stuff that keeps you up at night thinking about either, right?
Exactly.
The crazy amount of hours.
It's not the same as like going to a job, sitting at a desk and doing that work because so much of it is mental. you dream about it, you take it home, it ruminates, you know.
Yeah. Oh God, it's impossible. So even on the scale, I'm getting a lot of people asking me to frame stuff for them. I'm like, sure, I'm not a framer. I build my own frames all the time, you know, and for me, that's an extension of the work, and it's further narrative. So me building your frame I don't know, I'm not connected to the work. I can build you whatever you want. And they'll say, well, just build something cool. You're like, okay, well, how thick, how wide, what color of wood? Is it wood that I have in my stock, or do I have to go to the store to get it? Because if I go to the store now at Home Depot, I have to wait in line. You're talking an hour, a couple hours there. What's my time, you know? So I try to put a price on my shop time. Yeah. And then when I tell them the price of the shop, you know, they're like, geez, dude, you can't just do that for $100. I'm like, I'm not a framer, but you know, for me to take up my whole studio for a day, you know, that costs money. Otherwise, let me just
opportunity missed for you too. Like you could be working on something, you could be selling something else, you could be marketing other things.
Yeah. So it's really, really hard to price that stuff. And,
it is.
And I'm like, if you tell me exactly what you need to make and you give me all the materials, there's still labor involved. But designing and thinking about how's it going to join together? Do I have the clamps to glue it together? Do I have the stain, you know, at the end and the finish material, and how many days to dry, glue, clamp, sand, make look pretty? That doesn't happen in an hour.
No,
it doesn't happen in 2 hours.
It doesn't.
So it's hard to communicate that. You know?
And also, like now when I have people who commission me for anything, like especially a big piece that I know is going to take some time, I just say, well, look, you're paying for my time also, not just the time of creating it, but the time away from being able to create my normal projects.
Yeah.
And do my normal work. Like I'm basically putting everything on pause so I can just work on your thing. So that's got to be factored in.
Yeah. And it's so hard to put a price on that stuff, you know?
It's ridiculous. And people don't understand. And like for me, people still don't understand. It's kind of funny, but after a while, it's not funny anymore. People think that I'm just like painting all the time. It's like, oh, being an artist is great. You just go to the studio and paint. And they see me like, you know, trouncing around. But it's like, that's probably 40% of my day.
Yeah.
60% of my day is doing all the other stuff. If you're lucky. If you're lucky, man. Right, exactly. It's the business of being an artist is very different from most people's conception of what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want to segue real quick to, I wanted to do this earlier, but I was enjoying talking to you. Your origin story. I always do the origin story.
Oh, yeah.
We touched on it a little bit, but mainly like the progression of Scott through to how you became an artist and kind of what was the impetus for you thinking that you could actually do this for a living?
Great. It's a good story. I mean, I'll try to rush through it because it's long too.
Take your time.
But so I went to college for film. I went to film school, and I loved that chaotic world. It was creative.
Yeah.
And I segued that into working at a company that made camera cranes and dollies for the film industry. So I was doing machining and welding, and that's kind of where I learned the metalworking aspect of what I do now. And I saw the film industry, you know, it's a rough thing. And the people that I worked, I saw 60-year-old grips carrying sandbags and stands. And I was like, okay, I
mic operators.
I think I want to get out of that. And my buddies were doing computer graphics and video game design. And I said, yeah, I want to do that. And my friend said, I'll try to get you a job at DreamWorks in LA. Right. And, so I came out here and I tried to get a job doing the video game stuff. It didn't happen, but I got really good at Photoshop. And I was able to get in at when the .com boom came. They just needed people. So I worked at eToys, which was like, it was awesome, you know, to be on the ground floor of this company. And I was doing Photoshop work all day, you know, just product photography. It was great, you know. We got stocks. We were like, yeah, you know, pre-IPO, we're going to be rich.
And you were pretty young at this point too.
I was 29. Yeah. So, yeah. And it was exciting. And I just moved to LA and I had this whole new group of friends and we were all like, we were stoked because we were like the best company and we had stock. I didn't know what stock was. But by the time our stock was worth anything, the company, like it went from something 200,000 to like toilet paper the next day.
Oh shit.
When the company tanked, and that left me with, I was, like 4 months away from having my kid. The .com boom happened.
Oh man.
You know, the downward spiral. I got laid off. My wife at the time got laid off and we were in LA with nothing. And I scored a job.
The company folded too?
Yeah, eToys went under. You know, I mean, they got sold, and it, you know, but then everyone from the .com was out of work, right? I got very lucky. Excuse me, very lucky that a manager from there went and got a job at Mattel when they were changing from standard photography to digital photography.
Nice.
And they needed retouchers. I knew Photoshop. That's it. I went from basically working in a machine shop, greasy, to sitting behind a computer, pushing pixels, and it worked great. They provided, I was raising my son, and it provided this great world. At no time did I call myself an artist. This is an important part.
Right.
Like on my business card, it said digital artist. But if you asked me what I did, I was like, I'm a retoucher, a Photoshop artist, whatever. But I never thought of myself as an artist. But years and years of daily grind. I worked there 15 years, and it was a lot of hand painting, digital hair and makeup and stuff like that. And I didn't realize that those skills were applicable to real life painting. Up until that point, I hadn't taken art classes in school. And
sorry, but not to mention the marketing side of putting your work online, doing the photo retouching, putting it in the content. I mean, that's simple, but it's a skill.
Yeah. I get it now how that helps. And so fast forward, I did 15 years, and then my marriage fell apart, and I was kind of floating in this like not sure world, this inconsistent world, and that's ultimately when I met Shannon, and she is really the impetus. If you really look at it, because I was brought up in this like really responsible thing, and just going off to explore art wasn't really an option. It was like, dude, you got to work, and if you have a job, that's great. So upon dating, we went to one of these paint and pour events, right? Where you drink wine and they have a guy up there, and we're going to paint a wave. Here's step one on this wave, right? And Shannon, she majored in fine art, and like I watched her, and she was just all over the board. It was totally different what she was doing. And being a surfer, I had my version of a wave. I'd stared at magazines all the time, so I had this wave going, and I looked around. I was like, oh man, everyone did exactly what that guy told them, and we just went and did like whatever we wanted. I was like, what I was realizing is that the brushstroke and color theory that I'd been sitting digitally actually related to the physical element. This is the first time I ever painted on canvas, right?
Yeah.
Instantly hooked. Like that was it. Like I'm getting brush, canvas, and setting up an easel. I'm painting all these different stuff, and so that like kickstarted my process of like, oh, maybe I could create art. Still working full time, and then but I've always been a builder. So my time in doing the machine shop stuff, woodworking, metalworking has always been kind of a side thing. So I started doing furniture.
Technical difficulties.
Jesus, calm down, Preston. I don't know how excited you that much.
Nervous twitch.
You're getting angry at me and start throwing stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's over.
So I was doing woodworking. So the next phase of it is like I was building stuff and then getting a response from it, and you can look, I had days of journaling where I was just like, I want to, my goal for the year is to build one thing and sell it. Nice. That goal came up the next year. That goal came up almost 3 years where I didn't do it, but it was a goal. And so finally, when someone responded to, I think it was a fire pit. I had sold some little planters. I was doing fountains and fire pits and this really creative, like wood. I liked outdoor stuff. And then when I actually sold something, I was like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. And so me getting my studio was me looking for a place that I could work at night and on the weekends while doing my full-time job. So I got this industrial, I got super lucky.
First of all, that's very important.
Yeah, I got super lucky and I got this industrial space, 1,000 square foot, but I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't realize there was other artists in there. There was mechanics and stuff. It's really ungentrified. So, we had a little bit of everything, but there was these serious artists who've been in the game a long time. And it was super beneficial. And they were like, well, you should do an open studio. Cause I had some furniture and stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of serendipitous.
I was doing a lot of reclaim stuff. I would find stuff and build something out of it. And they're like, do an open studio. I was like, what's that? And so I did that. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And everybody was like, that's a great chair. You should make 100. And I was like, I don't want to make 100. That's the chair. That's what I made.
Yeah.
Realizing, so that kind of functional art. I kind of eased into it by doing functional art. The whole time I was like painting on the side, but not really talking about it. I was just having fun with painting. And then it just developed from there to where I started seeking out mentors within the art world. I had some built-in ones. So some of my neighbors were a really prominent artist and they helped me in different areas, whatever it was. If I needed to think how to think about art, I had one person. If I needed how to paint, and advice on painting, I had another person. And recently
It's like a crash course.
Yeah. So instead of going back to school, I sought out the people that I liked what they were doing.
This was like school.
And I just asked them,
but like in real life practice.
Yeah. Are you doing workshops? Are you doing, so I've done a couple of these things and connected with people that I really admired and just grown exponentially off of that, rather than going, okay, I should go back to art school and figure this out. Just finding mentors, and
that's invaluable.
To this day, that's still happening throughout that process, and so ultimately I had the workshop that I was building stuff in, and then the space next to me became available, and these don't come up that often. And I was like, I just got to snag it. So I have two next to each other, but I couldn't really afford it. And ultimately I ran into a couple friends that needed space. And so I have kind of like a workshop, and then I have a painting, sculpting side that I split with two other artists. Mm-hmm. And we've got a nice little community. You gotta come check it out.
I know. I still need to get down there.
Yeah.
I was going to, and then this whole shit.
We were about to do an open studio, and right. So the next time we do an open studio, when stuff ramps up, I'll definitely throw you on the invite, and you can see.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's good. From the pictures and the videos, like the Mike interview, the studio looks awesome. Like that's like the dream studio.
What I'm sad about that is like Mike's like, oh, I got to do a quick interview, blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay. So I didn't clean or anything, and it just looks like I'm looking back. I'm like, oh man, it was so messy and so unplanned.
It didn't read in the video. But the studios are supposed to be a little messy anyway.
That's what it is. Yeah, dude. I go there and I get filthy because woodworking and metalworking is just inherently filthy, and
sure.
Again, painting
too.
I can throw paint around, like when I first moved into the studio, like I let my kid and his friends just spray paint anything they want. Just go have at it, man.
See, that's awesome.
Oh yeah, it's great. Industrial space. Like it's been the best thing. Like I'm going to fight for my life to keep that space no matter what, because it's, being uninhibited by and leaving a project in the middle of something. I'm constantly jumping from 5 different things. So I've got the big cat, which is important because someone's commissioned me to do that. But mentally, I can't do that unless I have this, and this going on at the same time.
And you have the space to do it.
And I have the space to do it. Yeah. That space is so valuable. And we're really lucky. Like it hasn't been. So we're in Hawthorne. And if you're familiar with it, like SpaceX is close to there. Yeah. And so when they started getting popular, all the industrial spaces start, people are buying them and just blowing up the rent,
So are you renting it or?
I'm renting it.
Okay. So have the rents skyrocketed yet?
No. No. We're super lucky. The woman who owns the building I don't know. I think she can get more, like she could gouge. She doesn't.
We'll edit this part out.
Yeah. She could gouge, but she doesn't. And her whole thing is just like, just pay your rent every month and I'm fine. Don't break anything, and don't bother me. Basically,
see, that's cool.
Yeah, you have to see it though, because there's 2 sides to it. There's an owner that owns one side and an owner that owns the other side, and the other side is way different than our side.
Yeah,
the other side, they don't want any artists, because of insurance purposes,
really?
And they don't. Yeah, because we were doing these big events, and they were like, "Oh, you can't do that. You got to get a permit." And our landlord's like, "Yeah. As long as I don't hear about it, we're fine." It's like, okay, cool.
See, that's kind of more of an old school approach. Now they're worried about all that. Well, I wanted to say a couple things. That's a lot. Thanks for sharing.
Sorry, that's the origin. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. The thing that I dig about it is, it sucks that I always have to relate this back to myself. But hey, I can only relate to my own experiences. But it's cool that you have these stages. You did this, you learned this skill, this little skill, and then all of a sudden they kind of came together, and it's like, I'm using all of these things. Because that happened with me too. I went to school for acting and painting, and I was like, I came down here to try it. I focused on painting, and then I was like, I'm never going to use this again. But then I started doing the podcast, and I started doing the YouTube channel, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of starting to use some of these skills that I did, the improv, all that stuff that I did. It's interesting how these things kind of work their way. So I think a lot of people regret trying certain things, but that's the cool thing about life is they kind of come back around. If you're trying to do something cool, they will find their way to work their way into it.
Well, and that's why you always ask the question of like failure, and what's your biggest failure? Right. And it's really hard because those little things you did, whether they worked out or not, affect what you're doing now,
and make you who you are.
Yeah. And totally make you who you are, whether it be relationship, whether it be, a job or whatever, you learn something and it sticks and it goes into the art. And that's why I love the art too, because you can express yourself, you can express the community, you can express all kinds of things within that if you dig.
Yeah.
And that's why I have tons of respect for people who really dig. I don't respect if you just like throw it together. Look, I did something beautiful. It's like, come on, man, dig, put some emotion. Let me
dig
see
a little deeper.
Let me see you bleed a little, sweat a little,
Yeah.
you know, and then what comes out of it, and then let's talk about it. You know,
for sure. Oh, another cool thing that I want to talk about is the mentorship thing.
Yeah.
That is the best way to learn anything. You never needed to go to school for art. I went to school for art. I mean, it wasn't like an MFA program or anything, but the most valuable thing that I learned is I had a mentor who was a fucking painter, and he showed me how he was working every day. He would wake up at 8 a.m. and do his painting, then teach his classes. Every day he worked. So I got to go into a studio. I got to learn the process of being an artist. I learned so much more just talking to this guy, hanging out with him and working with him than I did in all my classes combined.
Yeah.
So that's important. So if anybody's listening and they're debating whether or not to get an MFA or to get some life experience, if you can find a way to get a mentor or a couple mentors to give you a little crash course, learn some life experience, learn the business side, which they, to my knowledge, still don't teach you in art school.
Yeah.
That's invaluable.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And I've been lucky, and even Instagram, man, you know, like I connected with a sculptor here in LA, and Tanya Regier, and she's amazing. And, you know, and she kind of was liking some of my stuff. I liked some of her stuff. I saw she was doing workshops. I'm like, hey, or she was doing classes, and it was more than a workshop. And I was like, hey, you know, I would love to be involved. And she's just been wonderful person in my life. And now I have, like I said, a number of those, and each day, like something new. And it seems like if you're willing to learn, people are willing to teach, right? Like they like that. They would, rather than going to like a college class where, you know, half the kids are forced to be there by their parents or whatever. They don't really care. In these group settings, sometimes like someone who really wants to learn. And I've even been fortunate enough that I've had people come to me and ask for my advice and ask for how I could, and I was able to give back.
Well, they're asking the right questions.
Yeah.
They're not just going through a curriculum that's kind of a generic curriculum for everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a question that affects me right now. Can you help me with that? And they have all these people out there, all these resources to ask.
Because really, none of us have the same situation.
No.
Between finances, you know, what we're doing.
Completely different.
And they're all unique. And so you have to approach it with a unique kind of eyesight.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's what I talked about in the art market. I mean, the art fallacies thing is like, even when we were talking about different art marketplaces, and like you were doing well in artsy, I'm doing well here. Some people, it doesn't work for them for whatever reason.
Right.
They work better in a gallery situation. They work better going to art fairs. Like Betsy Etzenberger, she's like, she kills it at art fairs. Yeah. I mean, she can go and sell out each art fair she's at.
That stuff is glossy and shiny.
I know.
That resin stuff is like, hey, of course you want to put that in your pocket and take it home, right?
Of course, I would too. Yeah.
It's
but
gorgeous.
it's like, for me, like you and I maybe hawking some dark paintings or whatever.
That
could work.
But that leads me kind of to what I was wondering about your practice going. Okay. Are we out of time?
No.
But no, going from your surrealist, you know, you've talked exclusively about that, but like, what changed in that process, and do you get the same level of satisfaction from doing the paintings you're doing now as you did? Some of that stuff looked like deeper emotional stuff, but
for sure,
I could be completely wrong, and the stuff you're doing now could be even deeper emotional stuff.
It's a different kind of emotion.
It is.
Like for me, first of all, thank you for asking the question. That's a great question. I think what it was is I changed. I was so dark, man, for a while. And like Mike always gives me shit. He just interviewed me and was laughing about me talking about being dark. He's like, I don't remember you ever being dark. I was dark. Like my drinking days and my party days, my working in restaurant days, I came home and it was just like existential, just dread. You know what I mean? It all came out. A lot of my stuff was self-portraiture and faceless figures, kind of, you know, not like yours, but similar in feel.
Yeah.
And for me, that was just very cathartic. Like that's how I got it out. It was like self-medicating.
Right.
Now it's one of those things where I started to kind of play around with abstracting the backgrounds. Like my surrealist stuff had very colorful backgrounds. I was starting to do this, and I started to kind of just see that natural progression. But as I got happier, as I learned how to deal with myself and the world a bit more, it just seemed like the direction I was heading.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just, I don't know, one day it was almost like I woke up one day and I was like, I'm now an abstract artist. You know what I mean? And of course, some people are going to be like, oh, whatever, sell out. He's doing it because this sells more. But no, it wasn't like that for me. It was just, that's what I wanted to do. And to answer your question about emotion, sometimes I can convey so much more in a painting that I do in 2, 3, 4 hours, like in a moment of like, I hate to say this because it sounds so, I don't know, elitist or whatever, but like a moment of rapture, you're just capturing it all. But like, whereas you're doing, if you're doing a figurative one and there's a lot of detail, sometimes you have to maintain that level for like, I used to paint for 14 hours straight.
Oh my God.
And I would just be like, and you just get that level of exhaustion. So how do you keep that up? Whereas like an abstract one, I can get in there, knock it out, and just capture something I'm feeling in the moment, Well,
it's kind of something.
I don't know if that answered your question.
It did. And something I just thought of when you were speaking to that is like, it seems like that earlier work was kind of a release and a therapy for you.
Definitely.
Whereas this newer work is kind of for everybody else. Like everybody else can get emotion. I can have a common emotion with this stuff, but maybe not the other stuff because I didn't share that emotion, if it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might not be, I might not connect with it where this is more, has a universal emotional value that is something people can get something when they buy it and put it in their home. They receive, brilliant every day. It's colorful when they walk in and they get joy and they get some emotion out of that rather than, oh, I just bought Preston's dark, creepy shit. And then that's what I face. It's like, oh, I don't want to see Scott's downward spiral, and put that on my wall.
Some people do, but there's not as many people.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's funny. I think you articulated almost perfectly. Well, you helped me to articulate in my own mind perfectly, which was, I think that was my old stuff was a representation of my own selfish inner struggle. And this is more of like, okay, there's a world that's bigger than me out here.
For you.
I'm stepping outside of myself, and I stopped taking myself so seriously. I started realizing that, like, look, my struggle, it matters. Yeah. Like I used to tease myself that, like, because it was so personal, it was universal, and there is some truth to that because other people are going through a similar existential dread, and that's going to speak to them. But that was also a little bit of me just kind of rationalizing. Some of my new stuff is just like, this is for the world. This is for humanity. That's
an interesting perspective that I think I'm just noticing now. And
you're right. No, you're right on.
It's super valid. And a lot of people, again, when I'm addressing anybody that comes to ask me for advice about the art world's a very broad world. Like,
it is. You
can enter at any spot you want. You can try to go fine art. You can, try to go craft art. It's still art. It's still creative. And I had this conversation. So I had a chance. My friend Dijon. Did you meet Dijon?
I think so. Yeah.
His energy is undeniable when you meet him. He's a very personal character, and he came to me with a lot of these questions, and I said, you can jump in at any point you want. There's room for everybody, but that's up to you on how you want to approach it. You can be the tortured artist that just sits in your studio, or And so fast forward, I kind of helped him. I got him in his first show, and
nice.
And he just took off. He just needed someone to say yes. Like that. So Shannon to me was the one who said, yes, you should do this. Yes, there's value in this. Yes, it's a wonderful thing. Keep going. Do it. And so I kind of gave that to him. And fast forward to a few years later, he's kept up with me, and now he works for a program called Able Arts Network.
Okay.
And I think Able Arts Department Network. Anyways, it's for people with disabilities to go, and he coaches and teaches art. And
that's awesome.
He brought a group over to my studio, and the realization that I had at that moment was, like, I hang around with people that are in the West Side art world that it's hard to get into, and it's like elitism. These guys came over and all kinds of a variety of disabilities, but their love for art. The one guy just told me he can't stop. Like, he wakes up and he has to sketch constantly.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you just realize, dude, art is for everybody, and fuck everybody who says otherwise, right?
I completely agree with you.
It's for everybody. And to see people with disabilities that don't, but they get something out of just scratching on a piece of paper, sculpting, whatever. It's really a beautiful thing. So there's a place for everybody. And
also what a beautiful release, and a way to kind of work through some of your own issues, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be existential dread. It can just be anxiety. It can be happiness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where to put this happiness. I'll put it here. You know what I mean?
I'm really inspired by that because I think in the beginning I spent a lot of time like, I want to be a fine artist. I want an A-chip gallery, whatever, blue chip gallery. I want to be up there with those guys. And those things all still exist.
Sure.
But at the same time, you're like, well, fuck it if I never do, man.
Exactly.
Because really, really, really the goal is to create every day.
That's it.
For the rest of my life. That's the goal.
And to do something your own way a little bit,
Well, you got to do your own way. And it's like, if your goal is to sell, you're going to approach that differently than my goal is to create my inner emotions, to release that. Of course, you want it all to come together perfect. And your inner emotions and things you create are valuable to everybody else and they pay you millions of dollars. Well, of course. But really, what are you going to do after you get that $1 million? You're going to go back and paint. You're going to go back and sculpt.
Well, hopefully that's it. And if that's not the thing that's happening, then you're probably in it for the wrong reason.
You're in it for the wrong reasons. That's the goal, is how do I maintain this lifestyle?
Yeah.
And
some people, going back to your other point earlier, everybody's coming from a different place, different financial place, whatever, different location, maybe the country you're living in. It doesn't foster the arts, maybe it's hard to make a living there. Maybe you can't find the materials, but you got to find that balance within. But at its like most simplified level, you got to be doing it for the art. You got to be doing it because you want to create, right?
I hope so. You know, I mean, that's the real, and I try to surround myself with people like that. So I don't know many of the other people that, I mean, once in a while we do those group shows, and
I've met some people who, by the way, are like, I'm in it. Like I'm getting, first of all, it's ridiculous to think that you're going to just come into the art world and like just make $1 million selling art. Right?
So many of those people.
It's like, dude, this is not easy. Like, you have no idea.
I met I have good stories about those people that are like, dude, look, I painted some flowers. Like, I think I'm going to sell 1,000 of these and I'm going to quit my job. I'm like, what? No, dude, what?
No,
so wrong.
No, exactly. First of all, you're probably not going to sell that. And then secondly, if you do sell that, you got to repeat that like 1 million times.
Yeah, man.
It's ridiculous. Do you mind if we take a quick break?
Take it.
Quick pee break, maybe?
Yeah.
All right, 1 sec. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's also creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Preston.
Let's see if it picks me up.
Can you hear me?
You don't need me in this podcast.
I'm just going to talk in a different voice, Preston.
It's great. We've got Scott Meskill. We got.
I'm just going to cuss at you for the next 30 minutes.
Yeah, just could you shout? Could you just shout at me for a while? Oh, perfect. This is the one.
Oh,
this is the girl. So we've got Rome Art Residency.
Oh my God.
Because that seemed like an amazing opportunity.
The best thing, like I said, being able to say yes to that was amazing. And
how did you discover it?
And again, this is another Instagram thing. I follow Brian Booth Craig, who's a world famous sculptor.
I almost thought you were going to say Brian Boitano.
No, Brian Booth Craig. He's a figurative sculptor, and he listed this workshop in Rome, and it's loosely a residency, more workshop, but they do have a resident artist, and this year he was reforming it after the company kind of restructured it. So it was kind of a first year for this particular version of this. And the artist that, I'm a fan of his, and the artists that were featured on this, so he was going to have a resident artist there, and that was Alexandra Slava, and she's a Ukrainian sculptor, female. She's just brilliant. I love her work on Instagram. And I was like, oh my God, these are two of my favorite artists. and then what he did was unique, is that one room was sculptors and one room was painters. And you couldn't do both, but you chose one or the other. And so the resident painter was Dennis Sarrazin. And I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but I had caught one of his shows in Culver City. He's another Ukrainian.
Wait, say the name again.
Dennis Sarrazin.
Sarrazin. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll forward you stuff because you'll be blown away. You would really like it.
Okay, cool.
And brilliant painter. So I'm like, oh my God, like the fact that we all can have like Instagram art heroes is awesome. But now they're saying, I'd never been to Rome. I'd never been to Italy, know? And it was like, hey, spend 2 weeks in Rome studying every day and going to museums and,
oh my God.
And with these artists. And I was like, oh my God, Shannon, I have to do this.
And
like
just the history of art there too.
If I go into debt, I have to do this. So it wasn't cheap, but damn if it wasn't worth every penny. And then after I already paid and signed
up, got more. You probably like soaked up like a decade's worth of knowledge in this 2 weeks.
Bro, like I don't use the term bro very often.
Yeah,
bro.
Like this is a bro.
You can't even imagine because I'll plug them every day because what it was is so and Brian is really connected. He has a lot of really wonderful artist friends, and one of his friends is Chris Kuksky.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know Chris, but his work is. I'm a big fan, and so after I'd already paid, I'm like, I'm going. This is great. He says, "Oh, by the way, Chris is going to stop by and go to the museums with us." I was like, "What?
Oh,
like, this
awesome.
is one of my hero artists, right?" So I had 4 artists that I absolutely Instagram loved and admired, and I was going to get to hang out with them for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so the day started, where we went to the studio and we sculpted for 6, 7, 8 hours. Like it was, and everyone was into it. And then after that, we would go to a museum or a church, and the people. Brian Booth Craig is just a vast wealth of knowledge. And the other guy, Jim, I can't say his last name right, Desicino, who runs the program, used to do tours at the Vatican. So he was dialed into all this stuff. So like, they don't need a pamphlet or brochure. They love Bernini so much, the sculptures of Bernini, that they can recite it verbatim for hours. Like we would, and as a group, we would all go to these museums and then we would go out, we'd have gelato, we'd have dinner, and we would hang out and we would talk about personal life stuff. So in the case of like Alexandra Slava, who's, I just admired her work. She's really young and just had graduated from the Florence Academy of Fine Art, and some of the best sculptors in the world come out of there. But to be able to sit across a bar top and, hey, what's your inspiration for that piece? Or what's your story?
Yeah, it's not like you're just doing like a panel talk where you're listening to somebody in a crowd of hundreds of people. That's amazing.
And with artists, just like we're talking right now, like the value, you can't pay for that kind of value.
Yeah.
And so then it's day in and day out. We woke up and did the same thing. And the other thing that was so amazing about that process was that the participants, there were some brilliant artists within there that also felt the same way about these artists and creating in Rome too. Like we were at the studio right in the middle of the Campo di Fiore, the marketplace.
Yeah.
Windows open, you hear people singing and stuff.
Oh my God.
And we had a model that is a beautiful model for, she posed for us for, I think 70 hours over the course of 2 weeks in the same pose for while we were sculpting. Wow. And so we're stuck in a room and in this beautiful setting, and this, I can't talk enough about it because it was that good. And so, you do this for 2 weeks, there's bonds and friendship. So I have friends in South Africa. I have friends in the Ukraine. I have friends at, Berlin and South America.
That's amazing.
There was brilliant people that were participating in this along with everybody else. And I'm telling you, like,
and they're going to be the cream of the crop for the future.
It was crazy when we would sit down to eat at night, and I'm like, well, what do you do for a living? And I'm a physicist. I worked at the CERN, where the particle collider. I was like, what? Wow. And you're also a brilliant sculptor? It's like, oh my God, there was a diplomat from the Philippines, this female who had been, and now she's an artist, and her process in life is like, there was so much gain from all of that. I was like, I think I took people off guard at the beginning because I was so excited. Like I was like, I'm talking about it now. I couldn't be more excited to hang out with these people and just share. And that energy lasted for 2 weeks. We were all, and to this day, I'm
sure you carried some of it back here too.
Well, yeah. And they were going to do the program again this year and they had to cancel it. I felt so bummed,
that sucks.
But I applied to be the resident artist there for that. And I didn't get it, but we've commiserated, but I have lifetime bonds with what I feel to be some of the greatest artists ever, like in our current situation. And the value is like way more than a college education, right?
Oh yeah.
And I got to be in 2 weeks in Rome, which I thought was a beautiful city. I mean,
and I don't say dude a lot,
but the Vatican, right? Like what kind of crazy. The other thing that I got from the whole thing, which I thought was great, is because people always approach me, oh, your work is so dark. And I'm like, I don't know, is it? I mean,
don't you get tired of hearing that?
But then you go to Rome, you go look at the Sistine Chapel. Like, what? Some of the stuff is crazy dark.
Oh, yeah.
There's decapitated heads all over Rome, right? Like,
for sure.
And so I was like, well, I'm not dark, fuck this, and I got so much out of that trip. Really valuable, would recommend Rome art residencies.
It's amazing. And also it's so cool to be like, first of all, you've got all these people who are at the top of their game, either in art or in a different field or both.
Yeah.
It just rises your game.
Totally.
It raises your game. Sorry. I mean,
totally.
It forces you to just step it up. And I think I noticed your work kick into high gear. It was already good, but it kicked into another gear when you came back. Yeah. And also, by the way, little side note, I remember I had my solo show at Shockbox and I was like, Scott's not going to be there. What the fuck? Yeah. And then I was like, oh, he's at the art or the Rome residency. Bad. I was like, oh, okay, that's fair.
That's why I got your preview. I went to the preview and then I was like, and then you said you didn't tell me you were there. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I had to miss your show.
Yeah,
sorry.
That is fair game.
Yeah.
And then I think I was helping my parents in Idaho for years. Yeah. So I was like, it was not a fuck you.
Not the same. Yeah, it's not the same, dude. I need a better story.
Well, they're old. Scott.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but that sounds amazing, man. So, well, maybe are you going to keep applying? Maybe you will be.
Yeah, sure. I definitely keeping in touch with these particular artists, and I hope they're friends. I mean, we all commented when you're spending, again, artists, we have this bond, right? But when you're really close quarters, long hours, discussing, analyzing everyone was really humble.
Yeah.
But I took a super humble backseat. I would ask for help from the guy next to me. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this and this? And people were open to giving their advice if you ask for it,
But that's a great lesson too, though, is be humble.
Oh,
don't
totally.
be the douchebag who thinks he knows everything, because you're always learning in art. I don't care if you've been doing this for 40 years, you're always learning, and you can always learn.
Yeah.
So that's great. I mean, that's a great lesson too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I wanted to get into a couple kind of like rapid fire questions, some of the stuff that I ask everybody, like secret weapon as an artist. Like what's something, let's say you're in that stage where you're uninspired, like right now with stuff that's going on with COVID and you're feeling down, you're feeling like this doesn't matter. How do you get yourself to rise to the occasion to keep creating?
So if I'm in the studio, the number one thing because this happens all the time, is I stop and I clean.
Oh, nice.
Because it's filthy. I have wood dust and metal dust, and through the process, I'm moving tools all around, and I have to stop and I look at everything, and it's that vacuum law of prosperity. If you're familiar, you got to make space for that next idea.
Sure.
And that is my number one go-to. If it's painting, it's
also
a different world.
It gets your body moving too. It gets the blood flowing.
Yeah. And I get so lost in the process when I have 5 things going, be it woodworking, metalworking, painting, tools get scattered and you kind of get confused. And so just organizing my space is a really good one to get me out of the funk, because it always needs organizing. It'll never be organized enough.
Right.
If it's just painting that we're speaking to, for me, it's just starting, that's kind of blah, but, or I'll switch it up. Instead of doing something I would normally do, I try to do like a portrait, a realist painting, because I don't normally do that. I can.
Yeah. I've seen some of them. Yeah. They're good.
Some of that is like, that's a different state of mind, right? When it's very much like the retouching work I used to do.
It's more mechanical.
Make this look like this look like this.
Right.
It's all credible ways to access those brain movements,
sure.
but the other stuff is turning emotion into a visual, and so much more challenging.
And also it's something that's coming directly out of you.
Yeah.
Aside from being something you're capturing, something representational, this is coming from you.
So if I need to just take a break from that, I do something realistic, and that there's a clear goal. It's like cutting the grass. It's like the grass is long. Now I cut it. It's short.
Yeah.
I have a goal, I make this look like this. And sometimes that gets you through that bump of like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like, it's almost a forced action thing. Like for me, I have some go-to styles that I do. If I'm not feeling inspired, sometimes I'll be like, I'll just knock one of these out. And through that process, I'm like, I rediscover why I love this.
Yeah.
And then it gives me ideas to do something else.
Well, it's muscles, right?
Yeah.
It's just like working out, the creative muscle. Sure. And that's
muscle memory.
I think we were talking about like the difference between doing art full-time or part-time, and I've experienced all of it, and my muscles twitch different when I'm doing it full time because they're always on. You know? I only take a break to sleep, and I sometimes I have to. Like Mike, came over and was making fun of me because like I hit midday, I need a nap. It's like I'm just brain dead. But then I wake up and I'm re-energized, and I'll stay up till 1 a.m.
Yeah,
I think I get 5 hours of sleep at night, and I always joke that like sleeping's for people that don't have anything to think about, man, because I got lots to think about.
Oh my god!
But when I got to go down, I go down. I give myself the break when I need it, and that could be at a random time during the day. But to have your brain always firing, I mean, this is a difference between sitting in front of a computer earning good money. I had a great job earning good money, but my brain wasn't firing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you're free. You have that space.
Yeah,
to explore.
Now I feel challenged. I'm problem solving. I'm digging deep emotionally. I feel like I'm growing. I feel like I'm progressing. That's what I want from my life. I don't want the easy road necessarily. That doesn't lead to wonderful things. Sometimes you can pay your bills, and paying bills is important. I get it. But if you have the opportunity to just dig in.
Yeah. And I hate to say it's so cliche, but this is your one life. I mean, spend it the way you want to spend it.
Finite.
It's definitely finite. That's awesome. So on the flip side of that, I think we talked about this a little bit, but about failure, almost like there's no such thing as failure, but do you have a failure that you can cite, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah. I mean, I have life failures, as a life, I have artist failures. Most of the artist failures have led to other things. Like you said, your learning process. But the one that comes to mind specifically was regarding my solo show. And I had this piece, man, and I was convinced that this was going to be the centerpiece of the whole show. And I was sculpting kind of a wire and plaster bust. And I had metal sculpted a big cross on its back. And I had written across the entire thing was, Father, forgive me, Father, forgive me, Father, forgive me. Like all kind of demonic looking, not demonic looking, but it was like, it looked like this wrapped bust, and it hung from this salvaged ladder. And there was it was just this elaborate thing that took me a very long time to concoct.
Yeah.
And I finished it, and I was like, this is going to be the centerpiece of the show. When you walk in, you're going to be shocked and awed by this piece. And Shannon came, and she's like, no. I don't think you want to do that. Like, reevaluate everything and look at it. And ultimately I didn't put it in the show, and I didn't show it. I have pieces of it, but so to say it was a failure, I don't know.
Was it thematic, or was it,
it
just didn't come out the way you wanted it to?
It didn't represent the body of work. It didn't look as clean.
Which is important.
It had a more Halloween prop feel to it, where
especially
you're like,
if you're doing a solo show too, you want a cohesive
Are you just trying to shock and awe, or is your message clear, and is it cohesive? And it wasn't.
Yeah.
And early on, I tried to just show everything I've been doing. I'm like, this is it, everything. And Shannon's like, dude, dial it down. Like, she's been my guide, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's like, important to have that.
Yeah, you don't need that. Everything else stands on its own, and it worked out. So, in some ways that's a failure, but I'll probably use the parts and pieces to something else. The failure is not understanding, is trying to push something that didn't need to be pushed.
Exactly. Yeah. Not being able to be malleable at all. Like, if you have something in your mind, this is what I'm going to do. Damn everything. Yeah. I'm just going to force this through. Yeah. No, you got to be able to adapt in the moment.
Yeah. So it was a lesson. It was a good lesson,
That's cool. Well, that's great. And it's great that you have somebody who can kind of call you on some of that stuff.
She's my rock.
Mags is the same way with me.
Yeah.
She's like, but a lot of times it's like, I don't like this. She's like, it's great. Somebody will like it. I'm like, okay, so it's kind of the opposite, but
it's help.
Having
a partner that understands and is supportive is huge.
It's huge.
And I tell this for people who have kids too, like saying yes, and like, you can do whatever you want. This is a good idea. Be creative, explore. You can always get a job, doing this later, but having support, I would never be in this game if it wasn't for her and her support and her like, yes, this is important. Yes, you should go for it. Yes, I got your back.
Yes.
Like, no, I'm very lucky, and I don't take it for granted. And I work my ass off to make sure she knows that, and everybody else knows that the main reason I'm here is because of a supportive person that saw the potential in what I'm doing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I had that in a different way with my mentor in college. He was like the first person Because my family was more like practical. Like, oh, we like your stuff, but man, when I get a real job. And this was the first guy, and he was like a real painter from like 40 years. Like he studied with like, I don't remember if it was the Ashcan School or somebody. He was like really, in it. Yeah. And he was the first guy to be like, he saw something in me, and I ended up being his assistant for a year. And it was like, okay, here's some validation that what I'm doing is good. And then moving to LA, I didn't get that for a long time. Yeah. But I had that foundation. I was like, it helped me to kind of push through some of the dark times.
Yeah.
So super important to have that.
If you're not exposed to it, if you're not exposed to the art world, because I don't feel like I came from the art world. I'm just only accepting that I'm part of it now.
Yeah.
But
you're an outsider.
But, I talk to these guys and they've been chasing it their whole life and chasing it. Like I said, each and every one of them could make $1 million tomorrow, and the next day after that, they're going to start painting again. You're just going to start doing the same thing you do.
Exactly.
You want to be able to sustain that creativity. So the goal isn't the money. The goal is sustainability. The goal is to be able to create sustainably.
Right.
So I try to keep that in mind for mantras and energy, and like my goal. I'm not trying to manifest money. I'm trying to manifest a way of life, because life is finite. Well,
the irony of that and the beauty of that is you'll probably end up manifesting money as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, but the money is only
it's not the main goal.
It's only going to enable me to do the other things,
Exactly.
And if you read like Tony Robbins and different shit like that, the paper isn't really what you're after.
No.
And so it's really
when
important.
It's empty when you get there. They always say that. It's like once they get to, if that's what they've been focused on the whole time, once they get there, it's like, oh, this is all this is?
Yeah.
What there's nothing to fall back on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And then, so I'm trying to think how young I want to bring this, whatever you choose. Yeah. Advice to your younger self. Well, it can be any age. Right. Getting into this game, what would have been important for you to hear?
I think trying really hard at the self-discovery game, doing more work on the front end. So in my teens and my 20s, I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew who I was, what I was going to do, and I was cocky. And it wasn't till my mid 30s, I think. And when my relationship fell apart, my whole world kind of turned upside down. And then I started really addressing who am I and what do I want out of life? And what are the core values that I'm looking for? And what does my dream day look like? If I woke up, would it be surfing? Would it be arting? What is that? And just continually asking those questions. I think if I could advise my younger self, it'd be like, hey dude, you're not that. Yeah. I spent my younger years just partying, having a good time.
Yeah.
We were having a good time. And I feel like I lost I had a good time, but I lost some progress in this world. Now I feel like I'm backtracking, I'm working harder because I only figured out some of those answers in my mid 30s to 40s. And I only started to go for it at 40. I'm 48 now, and I remember thinking, okay, if you're going to do this, 40 is a good time. And now I'm nearing the end of my 40s. Did I do it? Did I go for it? Did I accomplish it? Or but yeah. So that would be my self-exploration earlier on, to really be a little more humble. I think earlier on. Yeah,
and to know that things are finite.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, one of the things we talked about earlier when off mic was the beauty of being an artist is that you can keep discovering your whole life. You can work until you drop dead.
Yeah.
I know you can drop dead at anything, but I mean, you can live to be 100 and you can be still have a brush in your hand or still be out there welding or sculpting.
Retirement's not an option.
It's not an option.
I don't even need to utter it, because I know what I'm doing, it's not about that. It's about lifestyle.
Yeah.
And again, that may be a privileged look, but I know people that aren't privileged. I know people that, are constantly behind on their rent in their studio. I know people that can't paint because they don't have money to buy paint.
Yeah.
And then they get money and they're fucking stoked again. And those are real. If you're going into this game, those are real challenges.
And also on the flip side, there are people who are trust funders and who have limitless money and they don't do anything with it.
Right.
They don't create. I'm an artist, but you don't see them putting in the work.
No.
So yeah, that's very important. And okay, so where do you see, or where do you want to be in 5 years with your work? What are your goals?
With my work. I'm starting to get into bigger sculptures. I'm hoping to, I wouldn't mind doing public work. My goal is to do a bronze, and if you know about sculpting, you don't really sculpt in bronze. You sculpt in clay and it ends up being bronze, but it's a costly process and you have to have a reason to get there. So as a sculptor, I'm trying to veer more towards sculpting. But painting's always going to be there. So just continually developing, and obviously more sustainability, more bigger projects, more brain moving in the right direction stuff. I definitely want to expand. I would like to do shows outside of the United States,
For sure.
I want
me too.
I think that's a great, my experience in Rome was just amazing. There's a whole nother art world out there. And some of that, like, my work being like darker on the darker side, when you look at places like Poland and, dude, their artists are super dark. Like maybe there's a world that exists that people would really vibe with what I'm doing, would get more value than maybe California pop surrealism world that doesn't get me at all or whatever,
Yeah. I never understood the whole problem with having dark themed work in the first place.
Well, it's what do you want to hang? I don't hang a lot of my stuff.
Really?
No, in my studio, I'm full of it. In my house, it's like we started collecting other people, and that's been a huge.
That's great.
That's a really fun process. Like, buy the smallest thing you can at every show. And Mike was always surprised because me and Shannon shows up like, yeah, we'll take that one. And now
that's nice.
And I think
Dennis Dugan does it too.
It's smart. Yeah.
It's smart.
It's cool to be surrounded by that stuff,
Yeah, I was the guy who had the studio apartment and my walls, because just for practicality, I had my shit all over the walls, and I had like hundreds of eyeballs just staring at me at all times.
Yeah. So 5 years, I want to keep doing it, man. I want to hold on.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you will.
You never know. It's a crazy world, man.
That's true. But, it's weird. We kind of did this opposite. I feel like I didn't get a chance to really describe your work. One thing that I wanted to say really quickly was there's certain things that I align with 100% with you, like the kind of faceless, figurative, dark, existential angst, but also the working with found objects. Like for me, and I know it doesn't seem like it's, you do a lot more with like the sculpting and the welding and putting shit together. And I love that. You've seen some of my assembled pieces too. Yeah. But even back in the day when I was painting, I would like go in my car and I would just drive around LA in the alleyways, and I'd find like old fences and old pieces of like furniture, desks, and I would just come home, break them down, paint on the surfaces, window screens, everything. I love it, not just for the sustainability, but like
there's a life patina on this stuff. It's already been through something. Exactly. You're just kind of making it part of your story now, but there's already a whole dialogue with that material and how it got to your hands,
It's so cool.
So having my space, when you have a little bit of space, people know you have space and they're like, hey, I think you can do something with this. Stuff shows up at my door all the time. And some of it I can't refuse. Some of it's been made great pieces, and sometimes I'm just waiting for that one piece to show up.
I might look for your scraps if you disregard something.
Oh yeah, dude. Because I do glass, I do steel and wood. Those are all things like I have a hard time working with plastics. There's a value in that because of recyclability and sustainability, but I can't incorporate plastics too often, but steel you can grind and wood you can cut and burn and do all kinds of stuff. And old blown glass, like before when it's not in a mold, and you can find that stuff at Salvation Army all the time.
Yeah,
and so there's all these resources.
There's gems everywhere. I honestly, if except for the paint, and I could make my own pigments. I mean, I could make my own oil with pigments and stuff. You have to buy that, but as far as surfaces and material, I don't have to ever buy a canvas ever again if I don't want to.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. And I find it tedious. I don't paint on canvas a lot. Unless I find one, and I do. You find them all the time.
A lot of these ones were like donated to me.
Oh, really?
I actually paint on my favorite surface is wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just find wood, or I'll go even buy it at Home Depot. But I love painting on wood, especially found wood.
I do. Are you palette knife mostly, or
I do? Oh man, I got to show you. I got to show you
scrapers and.
I do. Yeah, I do. I barely use palette knives. I actually use tools more often.
Okay.
I'll use like plaster knives. The big
trowel.
Yeah, the trowel. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was blanking. I use a lot of trowels. I use a lot of different kind of putty knives and carpentry tools. Yeah, I don't ever use brushes.
Man.
No, yeah, fuck brushes. But I mean, I will go back to surrealism sometimes, and then I'll use a brush. But it's like sometimes I worry that like if I don't paint one every now and then, I'm going to completely lose my ability to do it.
Yeah.
But it comes back. Yeah, it comes
back. It's not
back.
a painting if you don't paint, Preston.
I know, exactly. No, but I think of my stuff as almost like carpentry too sometimes. I like the idea of assembling objects. Even when I'm not assembling wood and making these real, like, obvious assembled pieces, I like the idea of the structures looking like they're assembled, like
I think that's cool.
Assembled, put together.
I think that's cool. Some of the newer stuff you've been doing with these pointy and a lot of people are picking up on that and purchasing.
It's been like my most like sellable stuff, which I didn't think would happen.
No, it
sold like 80% of them. So
like we're so used to squares and rectangles on our walls, and it's like I did a frame like an offset frame.
Yeah,
that I was like, oh, that's bitching. Like you know, that will stand out and look unique. Someone may want that
for sure.
Yeah.
And that's hard too when you start kind of thinking about that side. Like, oh, is this sellable? But that's the balance as an artist.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are people. We were talking about people coming from different backgrounds. Well, some people actually need to sell their work 100% to survive. So it's how do you find that balance of being able to create what you want to create, but also something that maybe
I've definitely like recently, and I don't know. I think we talked in the critique group a little bit. I kind of spoke to the fact that I'm actually trying to bring in some different colors because people are like, some of the people that I really respect are like, dude, it's not that it's dark creepy. It's that it's dark hued. You know, your values are too dark.
Right.
You know, you need to, and because I don't have a structural painting background, I was like, oh, what if I just switch this, you know, raw umber with a fucking cerulean blue or something, you know, like, and do the exact same painting. You know, so I'm exploring that. It's definitely outside influence, but I'm looking to grow. So I respect some feedback, you know? Maybe it's not to sell, but God, am I seeking approval? Like I don't intentionally mean to seek approval with my art.
I think you're just expanding.
Artists.
I think to be an artist, I mean, everybody, especially in the music world, you're always hearing about sell out, but really, isn't that the definition of artist is to like explore, try new things, you know? If it's just 100% to sell and it's a commodity, okay, maybe you sold out. But if it's just, if they both work, if it's something you genuinely want to explore and hey, it ends up selling, fuck it, who cares?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So that's definitely something I'm exploring.
That's cool. So do you have any new ones like I can check out on Instagram or are you still working on
There's a couple. I think that last one I posted, it just has a little brighter colors.
Yeah.
You know, there's a character that is feeling angst and so still expressing that, you know, turmoil of something going on, but rather that he's in a dark place, he can be in a bright place and still feel the same feelings, right?
Definitely.
So when it stands on the wall, it could be something that doesn't evoke the demons.
Evoke the demons. I also like your ones that have the combination of actual paintings and sculpture within the same piece.
I'll show you one on my phone in a second.
Oh, yeah.
This is the newest one. So part of that is that influence in Rome, right? So you would go to a church and we'd be told how Bernini like sculpted this figure for this spot because of the sun coming from that window. And this is the painting that he knew that was going to be behind it. And this is the architecture. Like, they decide everything. This is right where it's going to be for the rest of its life.
It's almost like an interior designer and painter and sculptor
the whole
all
narrative. Yeah, they blend painting, architecture, sculpture into a little narrative. So like I'm trying to figure out how I can get there with what I do.
Yeah.
And it's a little tricky, but I learned a lot from
I think that reads though.
Too. Yeah. So I'm working on this shrine right now where I have like a painting. And here's the problem, though, that you've seen some of my frames. My frames can be very elaborate, and a common feedback is like, "Hey, the frame took away. The frame is so awesome that I'm not seeing the painting. It took away from the painting, and the painting's good on its own." So then you're like, "Oh, am I getting the most out of that painting if I distracted it with all this really bitchin' framework?" You know?
I think so personally.
To me,
Mark Ryden stuff.
Yeah,
he's got some of the most. He works with a guy who does these handcrafted, almost like there's thorns and antlers coming out of the frames, and they're their own art piece, but together is beautiful.
That's how I think. I think of it like a salad bar, right? Like I like each piece, but boy, when you put that salad together, it's all, oh man, that's awesome, you know. So yeah, and again, it's exploring what I want to explore.
Also, if it speaks to you, fuck them.
Yeah.
I don't know who said that. If it's your wife, I apologize.
No. Yeah, it's good. It's good. So yeah, I'm definitely exploring these little shrines and stuff. And my sculpting game, just like you said, it's kind of stepped up. So you can have this figurative piece with an oil painting behind it, and some type of architectural wrap around it, and it creates this really unique thing. Yeah, and I think that's too. I'm trying to find something unique.
It has like another shadow on it too. It kind of not only does it have the sculpture have the shadow, but it might cast a shadow and certain lights onto the flat 2-dimensional piece too.
Yeah,
I love that. Awesome.
Me too. I love sculpture and I love painting, and why not? It's like combine them. Like,
perfect.
Whatever you're inspired by, right?
Well, you don't see a lot of that either. Honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there was an era where you saw more of it, but...
Well, that's the thing. We were talking about just being amongst a million artists in LA. You got to stand out and be unique. So if I have this skill and I have this skill, they don't have to be separate, And
exactly.
I've been a builder, and like we talked about, these little things contribute to the overall,
Yeah.
This even goes back to, like, I used to clean pools at one time in my life.
Oh, wow.
And I've got a love of fountains and building fountains. I went to the Trevi Fountain in Rome, and you're like, holy shit, this is it, man. Look at that. The sculptures are just insane. And the presence that you feel is like, I'm going to go back and do that,
Oh my God.
So that I would
could get
love
some
to
great commissions for homes.
I mean, who's doing that now? Like, you can get standard, stuff.
No, I mean, no artists.
The little boy peeing in the fountain, I can get that. Right. But what if I do my style on an outdoor fountain that, really kicks?
That would be awesome.
It could be fun,
I could see that. It's exploring, I mean, I tried for a while. I partnered up and did like wedding dress painting, and it was my style just on dresses. And we did a couple, and we sold a couple, and it was fun. I mean, it's not something that I'm going to do for a living, but trying these different
Are you passionate about wedding dresses?
No.
There's the missing element.
I'm not.
That's the missing element,
But
right?
I was passionate about the painting that I was doing on them.
Of course.
The problem was the functionality sometimes was a little difficult. Like the texture, when the dress moved, it would crack. So I'd have to find these fabric mediums that I could mix in, and then you have to iron it, and some of them hold up, some of them don't.
Oh, wow.
It's a pain in the ass, but the ones that I did, I'm proud of. So I don't know.
That's cool. That's
we'll see.
Cool.
Just trying different shit,
Yeah.
But okay, well, we could talk for hours, but
we'll do part two.
We'll do a part two. I wanted to ask you really quickly before we tell people where to find you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to quickly leave people with, or is there anything you feel like we left out?
No, we're
like,
that was all.
I want a nap.
It's nap time. Jesus, you hit me. Yeah.
Okay,
no,
cool,
we're good.
So where can people find you then?
So mainly Instagram is what I feed the most, and it's Scott Meskill Designs.
Yes.
And I did designs because it was at this broad time. If you look back, I was making furniture and art, and it was like all over the place. Right. So I just left it Scott Meskill Designs. I've been thinking about rebranding it because I'm doing painting and sculpting. It's
so hard to rebrand.
I know. But so Scott Meskill Designs on
But also
Instagram.
There's a design aspect to any kind of artwork, so it works.
Yeah.
Scott Meskill Designs. And then you have a website. Is it?
I got Facebook, I got Instagram, and I have a web page. I don't feed it as much.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's like this new age that
all you need is Instagram.
Social media. It's like if I'm just doing research on artists, I hit that social media. How often are you active, and what are you doing?
Yeah, for sure.
I really still like Instagram, even though I think Facebook, I'm kind of ready to defunctly void, even though it's the same. I get it.
Yeah, but I don't hardly ever go on there anymore. It's like a dumping ground for like Art Finder, Saatchi, all these things. Like I just promote it on there, and it's
like, just in case.
Yeah, but I also like Instagram because it's like, I know we're talking about a critique group, but Instagram is kind of like, it has a good positive feel to me. It's not like Twitter where you can get some real trolls on there.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like you can share your work and it'll be accepted.
I'm so inspired by the work I see on Instagram. I'm like, oh my God,
it's great. No, I love it. Yeah,
so that's where you can find me, man. Follow.
Cool. And check out Scott's work. It's awesome. Great sculpture, great figurative work, and a nice blend of the two. Craftsman-like. It's great. Well, cool, man. I think that's it.
Awesome.
If you're good, I'm good.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me. All right, talk soon, man. This has been the Living Artist Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I just want you to know that I appreciate you being here, and I'm grateful to be in your ears. Your art and creative life on this planet is meaningful, so thank you for sharing it with me. If you like this podcast, whatever platform you're listening to it on, please subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also leave me a positive review to show your support. This helps me to reach more people with the algorithmic magic and keep the show going strong. If you want to see more of what I do and check out the art that I create, you can visit my website at www.pmsartwork.com or follow me on social media everywhere at PMS Artwork. That's it for now. See you back here next time.